5 years ago, Reilly would have just jumped immediately right into things. I would have definitely gotten hurt. But like we always talk about with fueling, right, you have to make small, sustainable steps.
Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty. I'm going to be interviewing Reilly about her pregnancy. First of all, I want to say, Reilly, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing about your pregnancy. It's not something that people really talk about, so we all really appreciate you sharing just a little bit more about what pregnancy is like, just so that way anyone who is currently pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant or just wants to be pregnant in the future has a little bit more insider information. So again, thank you for sharing that. Before we jump into some of the questions that I have for you about your second trimester, we're going to do our high and low segment. I will kick us off today. My high for the week, I do a meal prep Monday, and I typically test recipes before I put them out online because I'm kind of making things up. I want to make sure that they taste good, and I want to make sure that I have a little bit more of a detailed recipe to put online because a lot of times I'm just kind of throwing things together and seeing what flavors work best. And I think I came up with a really good blueberry muffin recipe. I love blueberry muffins, but I don't love that after I eat a blueberry muffin, I'm hungry again in 5 minutes. So I wanted that to be a little bit higher of a protein containing blueberry muffin without using protein powder because I don't love protein powder in a baked good. So I think I finally came up with a good recipe for that. So that's my high for the week. My low for the week is that I'm currently experiencing a little bit of like a calf strain, which makes it a little bit harder to run. And I'm currently training for some upcoming races. And so that's a little bit of a bummer because I've had to put that on hold for a little bit right now. So that's my high and low for the week. Reilly, instead of doing your high and low for the week, I'd love if you shared your high and low of pregnancy.
Yeah, so there's been a ton, but I'll keep it short and I'll just pick one high and one low. I think the low is everybody talks about how pregnancy is 9 months, but it's actually much closer to 10 months because it is 40 weeks and there's 4 weeks-ish in a month. So your girl's been pregnant for almost 10 weeks. So I think that was something that was definitely shocking. But again, very thankful that I'm pregnant. I think nobody ever talks about how pregnancy is closer to 10 months. And I remember one of my close friends was pregnant and she was like, pregnancy is actually 10 months. We were all like, you are crazy. No, it's not. And now I feel that. So that's my low. Then my high is I actually thought I would share some products that have been really like life-saving. And the two of them are clothing, actually. So I'll just talk about clothing today. Something I've been living in is the Align brand from Lululemon. They make like some shorts, pants, and I've been living in the Align products because they've been growing with me as I have grown through pregnancy. So they've definitely been a lifesaver because one of the big things I didn't want to do was like buy a lot of new clothes, especially because you're growing and you're changing every single week. Those have been a lifesaver. Highly recommend those. And then as it relates to undergarments, the Fits Everybody collection from Skims, also lifesaver because again, they grow and it will also kind of shrink back after pregnancy. So 2 things that I could not live without as it relates to clothing. That's my high.
Thank you so much for sharing those things. I will make sure that we list those products in the show notes of this podcast. So that way, if anybody wants to check out the Align or the Fits Everybody lines, they can do so. For anyone who maybe missed our podcast where you shared about your first trimester, can you give us a little bit of a recap of what that was like?
Yes. So disclaimer again, right? Like everybody's experience is very different. Just because I went through these things, I'm sharing these things doesn't mean that other people are going to go through these things. But I was very sick in my first trimester, starting at week 5.5, 6. I started to get really, really sick. The first trimester was a really big challenge for me mentally and physically. I was very sick. I went on a couple medications, was really, really tired. I think that's something that I wasn't expecting was how fatigued I would be. And again, just did not feel like my normal self. I loved to exercise. I loved to eat food. Wasn't really able to do either of those things. And it was also, I guess, and the cherry on top was it was the summer here in Charleston and it was really, really hot. So I didn't go outside for 2 to 3 months. So that definitely took a toll on my mental health. And again, a lot of people talk about postpartum depression and anxiety. And I definitely went through some of that in my first trimester.
How was your second trimester different?
So everybody says that the second trimester is the best trimester. And I would have to agree with them. At about week 17, I started to feel a lot better. I was able to keep food down, was able to go off the medication. I was able to work out again. Something that I love to do is work out, train, just be active. Doesn't even need to be like in the gym, but like go play basketball, go play golf, just be outside. I was able to start doing that again in that second trimester. Something that has kind of been a theme through my entire pregnancy is pelvic pain. I've had a lot of pelvic pressure and a lot of pelvic pain. So I wasn't able to run. I haven't been able to run in a long time. And I was hoping that in the second trimester, I'd be able to start doing that again. But I kind of think because I was out for 3 or 4 months in that first trimester, nothing really like grew accustomed to running. So wasn't able to run again, but really, really thankful that I was able to start working out in my second trimester.
Similarly to a lot of athletes that experience some type of an injury and then have to take a long period of time off from their sport, you had to take time off from your active lifestyle. How did you work through being away from activity for so long and then coming back to it? Like, what did you have to do in order to make sure that you were successful when you were able to start exercising again?
Great question, because 5 years ago, Reilly would have just jumped immediately right into things. I would have definitely gotten hurt. But like we always talk about with fueling, right, you have to make small, sustainable steps. I can't remember the last time I didn't work out for 3 months. Like, I cannot, like, I don't even think it like has ever happened in my life. Like, even when I tore my ACL, like I was at rehab, I was in the pool, like doing exercises, like I was on like the arm bike, like I was lifting weights in the gym. Like, I can't remember a period of time where I have not been active at like a pretty intense level for that long of time. So it was definitely a mind challenge. And then getting back into it again, like being patient with myself, taking small, sustainable steps because I hadn't done anything for a long period of time. So that was probably like a little bit of a mind struggle, but I was honestly just like so thankful that I could work out again, that I was like taking whatever I could get. Again, definitely small, sustainable steps, listening to my body, not making too big of changes, things like that.
I'd assume probably having some grace for yourself as well as understanding that your activity and your fitness level would be different from before you learned you were pregnant and before you needed to take a break from it as well.
Yeah, I think this is something that was like always funny to me was when I started lifting again, I was like, wow, like, you know, I've lost a lot of strength because I'm not squatting as much and all this stuff. And then I was like, Reilly, you are literally carrying a child. Like, of course, like you've put on, you know, additional weight and things like that. And that's also like weight for your muscles to move too. So you haven't really gotten weaker. You're just not putting as much weight on the bar because you have more weight in your belly.
Speaking of weight changes, during your second trimester, you mentioned that you did experience some changes that maybe externally people were starting to notice. What was that like for you?
Yeah. So second trimester, at least personally, is when I started to really like kind of like show my bump. I guess that's what you can call it. I didn't really have any changes body-wise in the first trimester. I actually lost weight, which I think is a very interesting, I know we're talking about second trimester, but I think that's a very interesting kind of point because I wasn't trying to lose weight. And if somebody had been like, hey, you look great, you lost weight, it would have been not something that was positive or helpful because I was super sick. I wasn't trying to lose weight. I knew that if I lost weight, it would be bad for the baby. So again, like it just was an interesting, like introspective point that I thought about. A lot of my weight gain came in the second trimester. And it was really interesting because I started getting weighed like every time I went to the doctor. I'm so thankful that I understand weight and I understand body comp. And I also have healed my relationship with my body image because again, going to the doctor and seeing that I gained 10 pounds in a month would have been something that I really struggled with, a couple years ago.
I know that working towards the place that you are now with your relationship with food didn't happen overnight. But if there is anyone listening to this podcast that's maybe starting the journey towards having a relationship with food that does not focus so much on weight, what advice would you give them?
I think it goes back to like setting small, realistic goals and also reminding ourselves that everybody's on a little bit of a different journey. I kind of compare my pregnancy to like being in season. So I was doing a lot of things that I didn't intentionally, I guess maybe I didn't know were going to help me during pregnancy, but I was doing in my like quote unquote off season, right? We always talk about like you survive the season and you thrive in the off season. So if you want to make changes to your body comp, if you want to improve your relationship with food, if you want to change your fueling habits, we really recommend that in the off season because during the season, it is really hard to modify those things. And just because I'm a retired athlete, I have that retired athlete perspective, I'm kind of thinking or treating my pregnancy like I'm in season, right? So I'm trying to survive. And I'm so thankful that I did work in that off season season, quote unquote, so that I was able to kind of navigate pregnancy in a more positive light, right? Like I talked about in the past, not working out for a couple of months would have really just shocked me. Or we talked about in the first trimester episode being averse to a lot of different foods, right? Like not eating fruits and vegetables, not eating meats, things like that. But I was okay navigating that because of the work and the education I had done previously, even though I was not expecting to kind of have to navigate some of those things during pregnancy.
I think that's a good parallel for sport as well, because there are certain things that happen in season that we aren't expecting, whether that be injury related, or if you're someone who competes at like a high endurance level, you're in a sport that we want to maintain a certain weight or whatever it is. But those unexpected changes, that's why it's good to have that good fueling foundation, that good relationship with food, to understand that those things might come up and we have a better chance of working through them to help you reach your goal, whether that be having a baby at the end of that or a successful season, because we have done that work in the off season.
Yeah. And I think too, it doesn't even necessarily, like, we talked a lot about body image and like body comp, but I was really sick in the first trimester and I wasn't able to eat. But luckily I had been taking a prenatal vitamin for 6 months leading up to that. So I did have some of those micronutrient reserves that my body could tap into when I wasn't able to get things down. And again, those are little things that we can prioritize, or those little habits that we can build in the off season that can help us optimize our performance, whether that be pregnancy or on the field during the season.
What fueling changes did you notice during your second trimester? Did you have more cravings? Did you have weird cravings? What was that like?
That's when my appetite has probably been the highest. And I definitely think that part of it was because I had not really ate for 3 months. So my body was kind of catching up. And that's even what my physician said as well, was like, we see this is something that normally happens because, again, you're super sick, then you start to feel better. And so your body's like, oh my gosh, like I need to eat, I need to fuel. So that increased hunger was something that happened. I also started to notice that I really had to prioritize eating before and after my workouts, and also really focusing on like intuitive eating. Like, okay, I have not ate in 2 hours and I'm hungry again. Like, that's okay. That's what's going on right now. I think it's funny, like every time you and I have a meeting, I'm probably eating because again, like my fueling needs have just changed, and that's totally okay.
Thankfully, you are in, again, like we've talked about before, a private practice space where it's okay to take a meeting when you are having a bowl of yogurt or you're still finishing your eggs or whatever it is, because we have that flexibility that allows for that.
Something that we've chatted about too is I started like waking up in the middle of the night and being hungry. I think not feeling guilt if I was waking up in the middle of the night and eating something, because just understanding that that's what my body needed and like trusting my body. I work with so many athletes, and I know you do too, that I think have lost touch and don't trust their body, right? I mean, even Ozempic, right? Like blunts our hunger, which is our body's signal or our body's cue to do a certain action. And we have lost trust that our body is telling us to do the right thing when it really wants the best for us.
Absolutely. When a lot of athletes and clients come to work with us, they talk about how important the trust relationship is between us and them in order to help them reach their goals. But just as that relationship is important, it's important for you to have that trust relationship with yourself and your own body to let you know when you should be fueling, because there is no rule book, no guidebook, no anything like that that says yes and no at a certain time that is right or wrong for any individual. Just like for you, in the middle of the night, waking up and knowing that you were recognizing hunger that you needed to fuel your body.
Exactly. I think an example that I always give is like, if you had to go to the bathroom, you wouldn't be like, no. And you wouldn't like do 7 different things to avoid going to the bathroom. Like you would just go pee. And hunger is one of those similar responses or signals that our body needs something or needs to take action. But we're like, no, I'm not hungry, or I'm going to eat 3 raisins, or I'm going to drink water, or I'm going to do a 30-minute walk, instead of just like trusting that our body's like, hey, I'm actually hungry.
Yeah, the drink water, right? Like just like you gave the example with like going pee, we wouldn't say to ourselves if we had to pee, like, maybe I'm just bored and I want to stop this task so that way I can pee. That one, and when instead just have a glass of water. I know we have talked a lot about this before as far as advice that's been given when you feel hunger is to have a glass of water instead of acknowledging the fact that your body is signaling to you it's time for some fuel. What would you want to tell yourself if you could knowing that you have gone through pregnancy now, looking back at your second trimester, what would you have wanted to know before going into that time?
I think pregnancy, just like fueling, just like anything, is so individualized. So not comparing yourself to other people. And then also just going back to like trusting your body. I was so stressed in that first trimester because of everything that was happening, but second trimester I did feel a lot better. I think I would tell my first trimester self, like, just make it to the second trimester and you'll be okay. I think just really individualized, and you just can't compare yourself to anybody else.
Fueling always is and always should be individualized to you. And I love, again, bringing up the idea of not comparing ourselves to others who might be in a similar stage of life, because what they need is different from what you need, and that's okay.
Exactly. And I mean, even the weight gain, I think the second trimester is when the weight gain starts to happen. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, maybe, that pregnant people have to navigate. And even if you do, have great body image, you start not being able to wear clothes that you love to wear and things like that. And so just reminding yourself too that it's like temporary and like it will be okay. It's also a natural thing that happens.
Change is okay, and our body is meant to change.
I mean, you're like literally making a human. Like, that's pretty cool.
Pretty cool. Oh my gosh. It's amazing. Is there anything else that you want to share from that time period that you want listeners to know?
I mean, the second trimester is when I felt the best. Pregnancy is like such a stressful time, and I guess something that I probably should have done, and I encourage other pregnant people to do as well, is just to have like grace for yourself. We're both competitive people. We're both type A people. Like, I don't need to be the perfect pregnant person. Like, that's not even a thing. So just having a little bit more grace if your experience was different. Again, like, just because I had this experience doesn't mean that this is the right way to have an experience. I know people that are sick the entire time, or, have different feelings in the second trimester, different things like that. So again, just like having grace. Everybody's on a different journey, just like fueling. And again, also remembering that things are temporary.
Reilly, thank you so much for sharing about your pregnancy journey. We so appreciate it. I know on behalf of the listeners and myself, we're thankful that there are people like you who are willing to share a little bit more about some of the topics that people don't really talk about. If you have questions for Reilly and I, or things you'd like us to answer on this podcast, please leave them in the comments of this podcast, or you can find us on Instagram. We're at the Eat More Carbs Podcast. You can find Reilly on Instagram at reilly.beatty.nutrition, and you can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And thank you for listening to this episode. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.